I'm going to read a story from Famous Fathers called Driveway. Trista is one of the moms I know from my son Eric's baseball team. She took off to Colorado with another man and left her 3 boys in New Orleans with her husband Brady. No warning, no trial separation. She just told him she was sick of teaching gymnastics, cooking the meals, and taxiing the kids. Brady works construction, but he fell off a scaffold and has been out for a few months, laid up at home in a cast. I call him to see if we can help, maybe get his son to and from practice. He says no, he can handle it. How are you guys doing, I ask. Trista's not coming back for 3 months. She leaves messages on the answering machine because the kids won't speak to her, Brady says. She's a whore. I don't talk to the other baseball parents about her. They all want to paint Trista an alcoholic, a psycho, but I can understand her doing this. How that stuck feeling gets so bad that you leave in the middle of the night, and how sure you are that you'll figure things out from a distance. You hope the kids will be okay, because this is a small piece of time in everyone's long life. I don't talk to my husband Hugh about Trista, because he'll think something's wrong with us. He'll think I envy her freedom, that I could run off on him and Eric and leave them a note by the phone on the counter. I don't want this. He's already told me what she's done is abandonment. He thinks there is a thick black line between a woman who stays and a woman who leaves. My mother had an affair with Mr. Ralph, a family friend, when I was 2, and she was pregnant with my sister Lee. My parents played in a touring dance band, Ralph, Roy, and the Roamers. She sang and my father wrote the arrangements. Ralph was the drummer. I found out about this when I was in middle school and my parents were divorcing. They stayed up for 2 days to argue and hurt each other with such old news. Ralph was long since dead, but there was a note my mom had written him 17 years earlier asking him to run away with her. My dad had it memorized and kept repeating the words to my mother. Ralph couldn't leave his wife, but if he had, my mom finally admitted, she would have been long gone. I don't know if she meant to take my sister and me with her. I've never asked. Lee calls from San Francisco on the 4th of July. She's worried about our mother, says she got loaded at 3 in the afternoon while they were talking. She drinks on the phone, Lee says, like there's something wrong with that. I think she's depressed. I know Mom is fixing her house and stuff's going wrong. The painter doesn't paint fast enough. The color in the dining room is too purple. The carpet needs a thicker pad underneath. What were you 2 talking about, I ask. How aggressive the squirrels are in her yard, my sister says. They look in the window when she's reading the newspaper, and her doctor said there's the beginning of osteoporosis. My sister frets about this stuff like it's hers. Those are her problems, I say. Why don't you butt out? Like you, Lee says. Mother lives in River Ridge, 20 minutes from our house. She's never remarried or even dated. I tell Lee that she doesn't drink too much around me. When I stop by her house, we may have 1 glass of wine. I don't think my mother's a drunk. I think she's on the phone with my sister. She lights a cigarette and pours herself a little glass of chilled white wine, and some of their talk is pleasant, some of it's tense, and then before you know it, 40 minutes have passed and the bottle's half gone while my sister's sober. You bully her, I say. I could teach my mother something about drinking, about starting early and sitting in the chair in the driveway, smoking a little cigar and watching the trees sway while you go 100 places in your head, getting to the other side of the buzz so it's done, and you've switched to cold water by the time your husband and son get home for dinner. I think Trista misses her kids all day, but that there are chunks of time when she feels okay, fine, living there in Colorado with her new boyfriend, better than she felt at home in that little apartment with Brady. The difference between a woman who stays and a woman who leaves isn't geography. You can be in the room and long gone. It's bolting without a destination. My mother left her family at 16 to sing and dance with Ralph, Roy, and the Roamers. She latched onto my father's family and didn't talk much about her own. We'd only visit her parents in Detroit once a year. As soon as we got there, she'd go off with her father to look at his garden. We called him Pop. He only spoke Polish. She was like a child around him, smaller and sweet-voiced, touching his elbow. My grandfather grafted fruit trees, and he would make pears and apples hang from the same branch. On the side of the house was a rock garden. I thought all those plants grew from stone, purple, yellow, pink, so many colors low to the ground and flat as scarves. I didn't know there was soil between the cracks. My grandmother was small and her cheeks were shiny and red. She wore a housecoat all day. Her feet were crippled with gnarled toes that looked more plant than human, so she padded around in soft slippers. and mostly sat in her chair, which touched arms with Pops. My mother says when her parents got old, they held hands all day, but how would she know? Practice is at noon, and it's 100 degrees in the shade. I stand under an oak tree with Brady and tell him Trista must think he's good enough to raise her sons, or she wouldn't have left. He's back at work, shorter days, so he can pick his boys up from school. We talk longer than necessary. Hugh's working late, and Brady asks if I can meet later at the Red Barn pub for a drink. We sit on stools, and he gets a draft, and I order a sea breeze. He's wearing faded jeans and a soft red flannel shirt with the tails out. His face is sunburned from being outside, and he looks like a boy I knew in college. You want your kids to feel safe, I say, even if you and your husband are having a rough time. You see them sitting Indian style in the middle of a seesaw, mom on one end, dad on the other, and the dad bumps the mom and the mom bumps the dad, but the kids don't feel the shock. At least that's what you shoot for. He brushes the back of my hand with his fingers. It's getting dark, and I've left my son Eric at home. Brady walks me to my car and slams the door, pats the roof twice. On the phone, my sister asks me why I don't come out and visit her in San Francisco for a few days, take a break from the heat. I tell her I'm busy with Eric's baseball. Hugh's busy with work. I want to talk about Brady, explain to her about what could happen, but she goes on, excited about a garden she's planted in the front of her house, and describes the mounds of lavender, heather, the purple sages, how wildly these things have taken off because of the cool California nights. I envy her weather and all these fragrant shrubs I can't grow in Louisiana. I don't want to hear any more about her plants. I imagine Ralph's dick and my mother at the same time my sister is in her stomach. I mention this, asks if she thinks about this too, and I can hear her pull back like I flicked her in the eyeball. What are you doing, she says, but it's all plea and no question. Brady and I meet for coffee and a sandwich. I want to stay in that small, sweet space between friendship and affair. This meeting with Brady doesn't have to resolve. If I sleep with him, what happens to the wish? We order the same thing, ham and cheese on white with light mayo. I take a chance, shake 2 packets of sugar, tear the ends, and pour them in his coffee. He smiles. I stir. He reaches in the pocket of his shirt and puts mint leaves from his yard on the table. They're warm and smell so good. We sit across from each other in the booth, and a patch of sun lights the middle of the table. My car key glints. I am happy there at the diner, busy-hearted for that hour. I've worn a cobalt blue skirt for him, dark pink lipstick, and a heavy, polished silver bracelet of my mother's that bangs against the table when I reach for my iced tea. The waitress brings our food, and there is mustard on Brady's sandwich. He scrapes it off with the blade of his knife. I tear off some of the mint leaves and put them in my tea. He asks me point blank if I've thought about kissing him, and I admit I have. He asks why. If I want something, I don't just do it. I like his question. It's like a cold gust of wind that fills your lungs with air you didn't know you needed. I forget I have a family. We walk a few blocks down the median, which is a blanket of red clover and yellow dandelions. We check into a motel on Airline Highway. I want to fuck him, quit the little diner dance, and go through with this, have sex like my mother had, straighten my hair, go back home and prepare dinner, sit across the table from my husband and son with the secret dripping into my panties. Brady and I lie on the bed, and I wrap my legs around him and rest my head on his shoulder. My mother and I took naps together when she came home from touring. The arm she kept around me would get too heavy, but I left it there because if I tried to move, I'd wake her and she'd get up. The air conditioner is stuck on 65 degrees and the room is freezing. We keep our shirts on. Brady runs his finger under the bracelet on my arm. I close my eyes to gather every bit of what he is doing, but I think about Hugh, how I prefer the way he touches me. Brady's got the TV turned on the Weather Channel and the sound is on too low to hear, but okay, a noise you can forgive if you get up right then and walk out to your car. My parents would bring Lee and me to my father's parents, and then they'd go on tour for 6 months at a time. They traveled on buses and planes and performed in every state but Hawaii. I dreamed of crashes and fires, my mother's and father's faces looking out the window screaming for help, and there was nothing I could do to get them home alive. They always came back for Christmas. One year their band had its own TV special, Ralph Roy's Roman Holiday. My mom and dad sat on either side of me and Lee, laughing and pointing at themselves. There were 2 things that took me a long time to understand: how you could be in 2 places at the same time, why the people at the top of a Ferris wheel didn't hang upside down. Trista has come back a few weeks early but hasn't reconciled with Brady. He still has the 3 boys. She's staying with her mother. I saw all of them at a baseball game yesterday, and it was rude to look, but everyone did. The 2 older boys standing far away, keeping her at a distance. Brady talking to her a little around the concession stand. Jason, the 4-year-old, hung around his mother and played under the bleacher where she was sitting. He used the word Mom in every sentence, but when he skinned his knee, he ran over to his father, and Trista watched but didn't get up. I sat beside her. I was hoping she'd volunteer something about how you can get free but still be a mother. I asked where Jason would go to pre-K, and she went blank, fumbled. Maybe she wanted me to go sit somewhere else. She had a camera with her and kept taking pictures of the baseball kids, of her son Connor catching, and of Jason in the dirt with his trucks. She could only get her oldest son, Sean, from a distance. Since she left, he's been sitting alone, orphaning himself. She asked me to snap one of her and Jason, and I did. He's little, still easy to catch and hold. I go over to my mother's to sit in her driveway and have a glass of wine. She's planted red pentas, and hummingbirds dart in and out of flowers. I ask her if Mr. Ralph was her only affair. She looks like she's been waiting for the question and says, I didn't love anyone after I reconciled with your father. Her head is turned away from me, watching a neighbor down the block. He's finally cutting off the brown leaves on that pittosporum. That isn't what I asked, I say. She's still not looking at me. It's not a good idea. Now you tell me. She sips her wine, watches me over the glass. What are you saying? Why did you, I ask, so sure her answers will be trite. I was young, stupid, lonely, vain, couldn't resist, just once. I was in love, she says, and finally looks at me. Are you? With Hugh, I say. One of the baseball moms tells me that 5 years ago, Trista and Brady had a baby girl they named Candace, full-term delivery but stillborn, and that she was embalmed and waked and buried in a pink silk dress. She says, when you ask Trista how many kids she has, she says 3 boys and a girl who died. Trista counts the dead daughter and runs away from the 3 sons who are alive. I don't understand how a mother can come back to her kids and leave, come back and leave. Something hardens in the child. Kids start to wonder whether giving up your family isn't some kind of peace. One year, my parents decided they weren't going to tour anymore. They came home for good and picked us up from my grandmother's. We moved to Shawnee on the Delaware, into a small house on 7 acres. Deer looked in our windows. My parents seemed like glamorous strangers. I was in love with them, a little fan who ogled their every move, but I didn't believe they could take care of me or my sister. They were dangerous. My father with his fast cars, always something small and red in the driveway. My mom spending too much money on slim dresses and fancy shoes my dad suspected weren't for him. I missed my grandmother's house. Some nights they argued late in the dark living room, and I sat at the top of the stairs in my pajamas to monitor what was going on, to see if they would leave again, because in one argument I heard my mother say they got along better on the road. I could hear the ice in their drinks, the scrape of chair legs, my mother walking through rooms to get away, her high heels clicking on the polished oak floors, muted by the den carpet, clicking on the kitchen linoleum, and then his heavy footsteps following, begging her back to us. Maybe Trista wanted to leave the day-to-day fear of losing a child. I don't know. I don't know anything except that she looks like resolve, and she's not ashamed to drive up in her old gray Honda, sit in her lawn chair, and watch her middle kid play ball. Brady stands with me behind the backstop and tells me they're trying to work something out that's better for the kids. She's going back to Denver when baseball's over, and she wants the 3 boys with her for all of August, so she can show them the mountains. I've only seen my mother cry inconsolably once, when I was in high school. She told me she had an older sister, Rosalind, who died of bone cancer 6 months after she came home from World War II. She was a Navy nurse. I didn't know. My mother explained that she was 11 and she stood in the yard with her father and brothers while her mother stayed in the kitchen. 3 Navy planes flew low over their house to honor Rosalind, trailing red smoke like bloody cotton. Did you cry? I asked her. I don't remember, she said. I could hear my mother sobbing through the window. Eric is doing his homework in the kitchen, and I sit with him and look at a magazine so he doesn't know I just want his company. I don't like drinking wine in front of him every night, so I've brewed myself hot tea. At 6:30, he says, shouldn't you be making me dinner? Don't tell me what to do, I say. I wait on the porch for Hugh to get home from work. He pulls into the driveway. Eric's on your nerves? A little, I say. I walk up to his car and suggest we all take a drive to my mother's house. I want to check on her, I tell him. You girls have a fight, Hugh says? Not really. When we pull up, my mother's in the front yard in blue jeans and yellow wellies, pinching off the basil's flowers so it doesn't go to seed. Take a ride with us, I say? I'm grubby from gardening. That's okay, I say. No one will see you. We cruise down River Road and follow the contours of the Mississippi. Hugh grew up in this part of New Orleans, and he loves this drive. On our right, there are small homes, car repair places, taverns, fruit stands. On our left, the levee is mighty and green. It blocks our view of the water, so we park and walk up the grassy incline to look at the river. A container ship passes, and Eric knows the flag is from Norway. Nearby, a young woman is training 2 black labs, and they obey her commands in unison. My mother looks puzzled but happy to be along. She whispers to me, "Is everything okay?" I stand beside her and pat her arm, and she settles against me. It's easier to love her when we touch and don't talk, when she's almost gone but not, like a rest without sleep. I load everyone back in the car and drive to the Pack-and-Sack, run in and buy my husband and mother and me cold beers, Eric a root beer, and 10 candy bars to ruin our appetites. We sit in the parking lot and listen to Fats Domino sing about walking and talking and hoping. Eric groans, but he knows the words. People run in and come out, purposeful, holding cigarettes, milk, bags of ice. A woman walks out with 2 boys. One holds a tub of ice cream, and the other swings a bag of bread. She grabs the backs of their shirts so they don't get hit by a car, and they shrug her off because they're sure they won't. Hugh asks if I had a good day, and I tell him it was fine, just fine. Eric wants to know what we're waiting for. I crank up the air conditioning until the temperature in my car is like the Rockies in springtime. We are shivering. I put my hand over my husband's and remember how thin the bones are in his fingers. That's it. Thank you, Bob.